7 Things I Learned from Zero Fail: The Rise and Fall of the Secret Service by Carol Leonnig. The U.S. Secret Service was founded around the time of Abraham Lincoln, and their primary function was to prevent counterfeit money from spreading in the United States, which was pretty rampant apparently during the time of the Civil War. Now they are better known for protecting the U.S. president and other government leaders. Number 1. Some US presidents were pretty bad people. Now this was a surprise to me, but the Secret Service protects US presidents and is by their side day in and day out, so they know the dirtiest secrets. And usually there's a code of honor, you don't talk about this and that. But like for some of the older presidents and when there are investigations on the president, they speak out. And some of the stuff they would say for their stories was pretty shady and troubling. I mean, terrible behavior. For example, Kennedy, JF Kennedy, was a very popular president, but he also had one-night stands with women, like every single week, with different ladies. It was crazy. Like, just everybody. I mean, I thought the 50s and the 60s was not supposed to be this bad, but yeah, he flaunted that, and his wife had a miscarriage and was really struggling and kind of suffering with depression, and he didn't seem to care at all. It was awful. President Johnson, his successor, was just so inappropriate. It's kind of shocking. He would show his privates off to people in his office. He even peed on one of the staff. Just, I don't know, something mentally weird with him, I guess. Another person, Nixon, tried to get the Secret Service to spy on his political enemies, including political friends, just to try and get dirt on people. Just pretty shocking there, but it's Nixon. Clinton, we focus on the Monica Lewinsky stuff, and it's like, oh, I made such a mistake, it's such a shock. But as the Secret Service described, he had these sexual relationships with tons of people all over the place. Like he'd go to a gym, and then the Secret Service would allow one lady, attractive woman, to go in with him by himself, and then he would walk out not sweaty at all after his workout, but feeling invigorated. It's just crazy stuff. So I lost a ton of respect for Clinton, both Bill and Hillary. And I saw an interview from Bill Clinton that happened a couple years ago, and he's like, oh, I made such a mistake, I was stressed out, with Monica Lewinsky. But reading this book, he's a liar then and he's a liar now, right? He had tons of these relationships, one night stands with girls, and yeah, and this is a US president, right? Now, just to complete the list, right, a fair and balanced list, Donald Trump definitely abused the Secret Service by going golfing every weekend or most weekends, making agents stay and pay to stay at his hotels to protect his family members, really stretching the budget, and didn't really care about the Secret Service too much. Basically a tool for him to progress his personal needs and agenda. Number 2, Zero Fail. Now the motto of the Secret Service is worthy of trust and confidence. Another motto, maybe informal, is Zero Fail. Like, we cannot fail. If we fail, the president dies, or this person dies, or something bad happens. But this mindset, which is pervasive in the service, at least from what I read, is really an impossible mission, right? Like, you are going to fail. It's just gonna happen no matter how much money you throw at it. I mean, the Secret Service has already failed with Lincoln and multiple presidents after that, then Kennedy, then Reagan got shot, and people have jumped into the White House during Obama's time. So there's always gonna be a failure. And trying to meet this, maybe unofficial mission statement, there's no realistic limit to your scope of work. Back in Abraham Lincoln, I think it was 4 guys protecting Lincoln on and off. And Lincoln was against it to begin with, and this is during the Civil War. But now you have snipers on the White House roof, you have dogs and hundreds of security personnel, and what do you need? 20 agents to guard you day and night? 100, 1,000? Do you need a car? Do you need a tank like the Beast limousine? It's kind of impossible. And because of this impossibility, rather than failure being a chance to learn, it's like an ultimate shame when it happens because you failed. And it makes the Secret Service a very high stress environment. And whenever a failure happens, the gut impulse is to spend more money. But then it makes your job harder because now instead of working with 20 guys, you have to work with bomb squads and snipers and this military and that military, and then you need to plan two weeks before the visit, and it's a snowball rolling down a hill, and it just gets larger and larger and larger. Number 3, I learned you need to punish people fairly from the get-go, or you may start fostering a toxic fungus in your group. Now, I like the word fungus, so I use fungus, but think of it this way. You have middle managers that grew up in the service together, and they look out for each other. If somebody makes a mistake, they cover it up, or they try not to squeal on the person. But then these middle managers end up teaching younger staff to ignore some of the rules. And then the middle managers become senior leadership. Maybe the middle manager, their senior leadership, start turning against the director because the director might be interested in stamping out corruption or cleaning up the agency. But then the middle management starts to turn on him. They'll lie to him. They'll give him updates late on purpose. For an example, during Obama's time, one of the new directors of the Secret Service was called Director Clancy, who the book really describes as a stand-up guy. And he's a married family man. He has like 5 kids. He's devout Catholic. He's loyal to his wife. He's kind-hearted. I don't think he drinks any alcohol, or he doesn't get drunk on the job or anything, right? But from the minute he stepped into his position, it was a bygone conclusion, because his middle management and senior management would just not help him. They worked against him. So you have this boys club in the middle, and they would fight against the lower people, and they would fight against the upper management. And unfortunately, Director Clancy was a really kind-hearted guy, but he wasn't the right individual for the time. They probably needed someone with I believe a congressman said, you need to be ready to send some people to the Mojave Desert of the Secret Service. And he wasn't the kind of guy who was able to do that. Number 4, work-life balance creates balanced people. And you want a healthy core of balanced people working in your agency. Now, I'm going to generalize a bit, but when you have a large amount of your staff being imbalanced people, they have to compensate somehow. For example, if you are on the road 80% of the time, working 70 hours a week, what do you think is going to happen? Well, a lot of the staff starts to become frequent drinkers and late night partiers to try and keep up with the stress needs. They also start cheating on their family members and lying to other people and this and that. And some of the better people will start quitting. And qualified candidates will not want to join your agency when they hear about, hey, there's a high burnout, there's a lot of covering up inside, you're going to be traveling a lot, your schedule is going to be very stressful, it's going to be low stability, and it's going to be very unpredictable. You don't know if you're going to be traveling this week or next week, or if the president's just going to be like, I want to go golfing now. Therefore, you want some degree of work-life balance, because you get the boring people, right? But those boring people really are a stable bunch of people you want working for you. Number 5, there is never enough money. Whenever the Secret Service had a failure, for example, Kennedy and then Reagan and then etc., what ended up happening is they would appeal to Congress for a larger budget. And then it would happen and they'd get a larger budget. And then a larger budget. So rather than really thinking about why this happens and really thinking about fundamental changes to the philosophy, what happens is they just add more staff, more guards, more guns, more security, more and more and more. But like I alluded to, if your purpose is zero fail, anytime you have a failure, rather than taking it as a chance to learn, you just spend more money. And now it becomes a ball rolling down a hill. You don't know when you can stop. Therefore, the agency always runs out of money. They're not able to adapt to the president and the situation very well because they're always worried about the maximum security. And one thing the author mentioned a lot in this book is the agency has been perpetually out of money for around 60 years, I'd say, or 50 or 70, 80, 90, for a long time. And it's just because I guess they're very reactionary. They spend money where it needs to be spent immediately rather than investing in the long term. Therefore, there is never enough money because you spend enough money to protect the short term, but because you didn't invest in the long term, now your short term becomes the present, and it just got more expensive and more expensive and more expensive. Number 6, just be honest. America can be very forgiving. The Secret Service struggled with a lot of covering up about drinking on the job and internal leaks and prostitutes and this and that. Even internally, it's not like the director I would say always heard the issues and just decided not to tell Congress or the president. A lot of times the middle management would not tell. They would not actually forward it up the chain of command. It seems like there was a culture of distrust to the outside, and a lot of things are kept internal. Like I mentioned before, it's like a big boys club. And the center of that is the people that work at the White House. They're kind of the elite. If something happens, they just cover it up. And that is eroding your actual mission statement of worthy of trust and confidence. And there are stories about people, especially on the lower tier of the agency, who would be honest and try and do change. But honesty did not seem to be rewarded in that agency. And there are repercussions, like the person that was trying to be honest and kick things up the food chain, right, the chain of command, he had concerns about the security on the White House perimeter, how people could sneak in. And those concerns were kicked away and he got almost reprimanded, I think. In fact, he might even had to quit his job. And what do you know? The next decade, they have multiple instances of people breaking into the perimeter rather than making these simple, inexpensive changes, i.e. investing in the future. There's a lot of fighting and backbiting and secrecy, and there's a lot of distrust and infighting and factions inside. The last point I had, number 7, great leadership makes all the difference. Now this starts in the manager level. Well, if you want to be big picture, it starts with the individual, then it goes to management and the secretary level or the department head to the presidential level. What was really shocking is in the Constitution, the US president's primary purpose is to oversee the government, as in his different agencies and departments. But the presidents, and I'm talking Kennedy, Reagan, Bush, almost all of them, never seem to be in charge of their agencies. I mean, I'm sure they have other things they're worried about, right? But the primary purpose in the Constitution is to oversee these agencies. Ultimately, the US president is in charge, and nobody, like Republican, Democrat, nobody really got their toes wet and tried to reform the agency. And it's like there are low-hanging fruit here. A president could have easily looked at some of the rules and be like, hey, it's probably not a good idea that you're allowed to drink on the job 10 hours before your shift starts, right? Overseas. The president could have easily been, okay, let's just change that. No drinking when you're overseas. Or something like that, but they just never did anything. Maybe this is a good example of the imperial presidency, where presidents become very political and try to function both as an executive but also as a policymaker and a member of Congress and get muddied up in those waters. Because a lot of these presidents should have been held liable for maintaining their agencies and spending a modicum of effort to reform things. The extent of most of the presidents and their involvement with the Secret Service seemed to be like, do you want to hire this guy or that guy? Okay, let me talk to him for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Okay, let's hire this guy instead. That's about it. At least that is the impression I had. Maybe I'm wrong, but I had that strong impression throughout the book. And those are 7 things I learned from Zero Fail. This was a fascinating book and really helpful. I have a great appreciation for the Secret Service, but I also have a great appreciation for the challenges. And just because people are popular or politically savvy or charismatic does not make them great leaders. And I learned a lot about that in this book. Let me know what you thought about what I said, and maybe have some points that you disagree or agree with. And if you enjoyed this kind of stuff, feel free to like and subscribe, and I'm going to keep reading books and putting out what I learned.